Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet Panel Community Safety and Waste Management. As usual in these circumstances, I have a few announcements to make up front, which is the standard. Due to the COVID pandemic, the Council will be holding the meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of this meeting are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking to the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use the meeting chat function as exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate and on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I'll declare the result after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. First and foremost, welcome Carly Stratton to the Community Services. I'm glad you're welcome on board. I'm glad you could attend this meeting. We met yesterday and we had a little chat about what happens and what doesn't happen. So welcome, Carly. Next thing is membership changes. There are none. Apologies, and this is a major disappointment. Apologies from David Lloyd, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and Chris Brace, the Chief Executive of the OPCC. The fact that neither of those present, they can't put up anybody else, is to me a disappointment. I now need each member to introduce themselves so the public can see who is in attendance. So, Joshua, can I start with you, please?
Of course, Chair. Yes, Joshua Bennett Lovell, County Councillor for Old Stevenage. Old Stevenage in Stevenage.
Thank you.
Quite fortunate to have my division name in my town.
Thank you. Simon?
Good morning. Yes, Simon Bloxham, County Councillor for Letchworth North.
Thank you. Morris, are you with us? We noticed he was absent from the list, so let's give Morris a miss at this stage. Sue, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's Sue Featherston. My division is St Stephen, which is south of St Albans. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
Hi, Barbara Gibson, Halden's division in Welwyn Garden City.
Thank you. John Hale?
John Hale, County Councillor for Coney Heath and Marshalswick.
And Fiona Hill?
County Councillor for Royston East and Earl.
Thank you. Joan King?
Yes, Joan King, County Councillor for South Oxley and Eastbury.
Thank you. Paul Mason?
Morning, Chairman. Paul Mason, Hoddesdon South.
Thank you. Tim Williams?
Good morning, everybody. It's Councillor Tim Williams here, representing the Woodside Stanborough division, which is north of Watford.
Thank you. Colin?
Colin Woodward, member for Bishop Stortford West.
And John Wiley?
Good morning, Chairman. John Wiley, Bishop Stortford East.
Thank you. And I am Councillor Terry Hone. I'm member for Letchworth South and the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Waste Management. Thank you for doing that. Next, we come to the minutes of the last meeting, which were quite extensive, the minutes were. Do we have any questions, comments on the minutes of the last meeting? If so, please raise your hand. I get the impression then we are content. There are no disputes coming. So we should vote on in the same way as the other business. So if you could vote using the chat function that you agree, as we said, for, against, or abstain. Thank you very much indeed. The minutes are agreed. We now move on to public petitions. We have no public petitions at this point in time. And now we should introduce presenting officers prior to each item, which is the first one is the update report from David Lloyd, Police and Crime Commissioner. As I mentioned earlier, neither he nor Chris Brace can make themselves present at this meeting, which is, is a major disappointment, because certainly I had some posers from his report that we have in front of us. So as there's no one available from the OPCC to attend in their absence, if you have any questions or queries on the report, officers will make a note of them and request a written response, which will then be circulated to all panel members outside of the meeting. So if you have some questions, please raise hand and we'll see what we can do. The first one I have some questions as well, I might add. John, you're the first one up with a hand. John Home.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I'll echo your comments about how disappointing it is that neither the Police and Crime Commissioner or his Chief Executive could be available today. I just really wanted to note that if you remember, I did ask about the Road Safety Fund at the last meeting. Normally, that is a round opens in November. The PCC didn't seem to know what was going on last month. I'm glad to see that a fund round has just reopened. But I'm not going to waste any time on suggesting questions to him today. It's a shame that he's not here.
Yeah, John, thank you. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, with the item of the PCC support with defibrillator rollout, the volunteers in Bishop Stortford are actually Hearts fire and rescue volunteers, and I imagine that is a scheme that could be replicated in other locations where there are defibrillators.
Yes, and perhaps we can ask him what his plans would be to do that. And perhaps he can come back to us and let us know what his thoughts are on that subject. Sue, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that I went to a local police priority setting meeting last night for the St Albans area. And I was delighted to hear that the new speed vans have been used in my division and around St Albans to great effect. A question, if I may, do I understand correctly that static speed cameras can now not be put up in Hertfordshire? So we're relying on the vans being put around rather than new cameras? Thank you.
I don't think I can answer that. Colin, any thoughts on that?
Sorry, Chair, just unmuting there. I haven't heard that is the case, and I would be surprised, particularly with legislation changing to allow more enforcement by cameras outside of London. But it is a question that we can put forward to the Commissioner.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'm sure officers can do that. No more hands gone up. I have a couple of poses, really. One, certainly. You remember the last meeting, I did ask a question about the data that was lost by the country's police force that had been scrapped, and said what was the impact on us in Hertfordshire, and the Police and Crime Commissioner gave a woolly response to that, saying not a lot really that was affecting us. I'd like to know what the current status is, because the recovery of that data was quite important. I'd like to know if it has been recovered, or if it hasn't been recovered, what steps are being taken to make sure it is recovered, and if there are any impacts as a result of it not being available to officers to use. So that's one thing. I was pleased that there were the Police and Crime Commission was making some money available for various things, including fly tipping, which of course is the other side of our life, on private land. The uptake on it sometimes be quite weak. I don't think we publicise it enough, and I think we need to. Certainly, the police needs to publicise more that is available, and certainly the districts and boroughs who have the prime responsibility, with one exception, for clearing up fly tipping, should make it very clear to landowners who have rubbish dumped on their illegally on their land that these funds are available. I'm not sure they do, and how do we communicate to that message to the districts and boroughs to make sure they do make the landowners aware that funds could be available to help them. So there are a couple of points I had. Other than that, I think we have to accept his report, albeit in a written format. report is really received. And I think we need to vote on it being received, albeit it's received in a written format, not a verbal. So if I could ask you now to go to the chat room and receive the report, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members, for that. The next item on the agenda would normally be, we hear the dulcet tones of my deputy Colin on what the police and crime panel will be up to. I don't think the panel's met. Colin, would you like to confirm that?
The panel hasn't met since our last panel meeting, but I can advise members that the next meeting will be the 22nd of April. And so questions from members of the public and attendance by members of the public would be most welcome. It's at the moment not clear whether that will be a virtual or a meeting returning to something like normality, face-to-face in a particular location, where we've tried to move around the county to give as much exposure to the residents that are coming to the panel. I believe the legislation for virtual meetings actually expires on the 7th of May, so it remains to be seen whether virtual meetings will continue.
Okay, thank you. If anybody has any poses they'd like Colin to raise at that meeting, I'd like people to attend that meeting because you can, as members of the public, and perhaps raise questions through the appropriate channels. But if you do have any pose or questions that you'd like Colin to raise, please feel free to contact him and make sure that he can voice your opinion if you do plan to be there. So thank you for that. And again, normally we would spend about an hour on these two subjects, and we spent less than 15 minutes, which I'd like to have thought we could have spent more time and energy, but unfortunately, yeah. The next item on the agenda is the impact of EU exit on trading standards. Russell, I think you were going to handle this for us, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So, yeah, this is a post-Brexit piece. We now are about 3.5 months from the end of the transition period. So it was a good time to update the group on the impact so far. So I just touch on a few bits within the paper itself. So in terms of background, the decoupling process from Europe has resulted in some quite significant changes for local businesses and for regulators like trading standards. And that's both directly through changes in the legislation itself, but probably more importantly, it's around the framework. So it's the things around how our local businesses can practically show and display and establish compliance, how regulators like trading standards can actually discharge their duties, how we share intelligence and those sorts of things. A number of those frameworks based in Europe have been switched off, and we've had to establish some new UK versions of that. So with those big changes like that, we've identified there's some real key challenges for us to understand and unpick those things, those issues. And it's important, really important, that we ensure our officers stay competent to support the businesses, because ultimately that's also how we protect the public. So paper touches on some of the ways in which we've been doing that. We needed to draft in some additional capacity on a temporary basis to keep abreast of the various published policies from government over the last year or so. There's a lot of content coming out, sometimes on a daily basis, which we needed to review to see where it crossed our remit in order that we could get ahead of those big questions as businesses were trying to prepare. We utilised expertise within our region as well to avoid some duplication, given that the legislation is national, so it affects businesses in Essex much as it would in Hertfordshire. There was ways in which we could sort of split the load, and locally, some of the stuff we did to try and help businesses prepare the paper touches on there. I think the key one there is the work with the LEP and the Growth Hub and the districts to promote that single place, so businesses know and continue to know where they can go to. There's the government content, which is quite dense, and there's a lot of it. And we produce some more reduced sort of bite-sized content, and we promoted it in that single place to make it as easy as possible for businesses. And some work that it's gone really well and good feedback on, and we'll continue to do, is attending some of the expert panels and business events around the county. To push the key messages and the key questions, really address those. So, Hertfordshire Trading Standards are here to help with business questions. Preparedness is key, and there's a lot of change coming. So, an example of that was just last week. We attended a really well attended online event from Herts Chamber of Commerce, where we were addressing questions there. Just to highlight a few of the impacts on us so far. Yes, demand is hugely up significantly, and it has been for the whole of last year on the service, and much of that is skewed towards COVID response work, which is probably unsurprising. But with the Brexit demands, we have had to pause some of our key areas of work, which we would ordinarily have been engaging in, and I will come back to that at the conclusion with the last item. But some of the things we've been doing. Some targeted work on industries that are particularly affected at the moment. So example of that is the cosmetics industry. We've got a key deadline coming up to share information about their products at the end of this month. So whilst there's a staggered rollout, some businesses right up front are hugely affected. So we've been doing some work with those industries. We're getting questions from local businesses who now have taken on post 1st of January significant new roles. So an example, a retailer purchased products to sell from EU member states prior to January now has responsibility when they put it on the market in the UK for the life of that product. So that's quite a significant challenge for them. They need to review of how they want to go about that. We've got a new UK CA mark now in circulation, which consumers will start to see, that replaces the CE mark that many will be familiar with, and that's how businesses show they're compliant with applicable legislation. There's a lot of questions still around the status of Northern Ireland, which isn't exclusive to trading standards, but of course it is relevant to our businesses. What does it mean for them if they buy and sell from Northern Ireland with its dual status at the moment? Looking forward a bit in terms of future impacts that are going to affect the service in Hertfordshire. We've got the end of the lighter touch border controls, which have been in place over the last few months in this summer. That's going to have a knock-on effect, and it's been quite widely reported in terms of the media already that there has been some issues with increased shipping costs and delays with products circulating around the globe, and some of that will be wrapped up within COVID issues. But of course, Brexit's been to blame in the narrative of some of those stories, so I think it's something we will expect to see more commentary on, certainly publicity around the impact that will have on businesses post-summer, something we need to be aware of. We've got so over the next 2 years, there's a staggered rollout for much of the new legislation. So key dates are things like the end of this year, all products will start to have that UK CE mark to be sold in Great Britain. And I mean Great Britain quite specifically there because there's a different status for Northern Ireland. We are really aware of where we have disruption in supply chains, the opportunities will enter the market where consumers want items. So something we've seen with PPE over the last year, something we see always annually with must-have toys at Christmas is lower quality items, counterfeit items, fill the void left where people can't get hold of stuff. So global shipping issues and delays at ports present opportunities, so that's something we'll need to be really aware of. Just to round out really, as it's connected to this, so I think a number of the members of the panel may have been cited on this, but the MHCLG letter covering delivering local authority services through winter. There was a letter from the director of the ministry to chief executives to highlight that EU exit support was going to place an increased demand on services around the country. And they also highlighted that with the significant role in COVID enforcement, there's going to be some competing demand on services like trading standards. So they helpfully provided a list of categorised activities from across Whitehall, and to help, I guess, with local authorities establishing how they'll meet the challenges. So we reviewed that document, and as you'll see, it's in Appendix 2 with the far right column is our update effectively, and we reviewed that against how we'd prioritised and what matters we'd paused, and we see ourselves very much in line with that, and the letter highlights that the support around Brexit features one of the highest priorities in terms of the government's view. That was probably my update on things, Chair, if that helps.
Thank you. Yes, questions. Let's go to members of the committee first and foremost, if we can. I think, Colin, you're up first.
Yes, Chair, mine's a very brief one. 4.9, the good work being done to eliminate dangerous or reduce the dangerous e-scooters. Just want to ask Russell whether there's also any requirement that suppliers have to put on to point out that use of e-scooters is currently illegal in the country on public roads and pavement areas, because we are actually starting to see significant increase in this. It's been something that my local police have noted, and they have seized some of these in use.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, so a lot of that's going to depend on the origin of the item. So where for example, purchased from within the European Union, for example, where the products aren't illegal to use on the roads, there will be no such requirement within the legislation itself. As it stands, there is no overt requirement for that to be stated on there. However, there is always angles in terms of regulation where something, for example, is omitted that will mislead. An unwitting individual may not be aware of the law, so that's something that we can look at in terms of UK supplies, in terms of the support we would provide, and where Herts residents are buying from other areas of the country, for example, where they're importing them. We can do that liaison work as well to make sure that those traders are drawing that to their attention, certainly if not on the box itself in the sales process. So yes, we're very happy to play our role in terms of the road safety on that and the items themselves.
I think that would be very helpful to stop people making what can be quite expensive purchases and then finding that they're transgressing the law and in fact possibly even losing their purchase if it's seized by the police.
Thank you, Colin. John Hale.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate. Well, first, I'd like to reiterate what Colin said. That was raised at the same police setting forum, priority setting forum, as Sue was last night, and it was raised at that meeting. The problem with e-scooters, and there was also reference to the fact that I believe they are actually legal in London, so the law isn't even consistent across the country, which doesn't help the matter. I'd also like to just, through Russell, thank all the officers in the trading standards. It's been an interesting year for them, both with COVID and Brexit, and I think we're all grateful for the way they have responded so well to that. It's also been an interesting year in that there's been a number of new pop-up businesses. Are you satisfied that a lot of people starting up new businesses of various sorts are sufficiently well aware of the advice they can get from trading standards, and are you finding them contacting you for advice?
Thank you for that. Pop-up businesses, people diversifying has been a significant feature through last year. Absolutely. We got in contact with whole sort of industries that never previously would actually have contacted us to find out about that. So absolutely, we actually created a sort of a diversification guide document, which we put to the Growth Hub, particularly around issues of distance selling. So, for example, when premises had to were closed because of the closure regulations, but they were able to still continue to trade. So we were keen to encourage that sort of thing. But yes, we have seen new industries popping up. Of course, we would like to have twice as many calls into the service as we've had. One of our issues, of course, will always be we want to reach more people and find new channels. And certainly with the local events we've been attending and getting good audiences, that's been really good, because of course in person these events aren't necessarily as well attended as they are online. We're getting sort of double, triple numbers because people are at home and they can log in. So we want to sort of keep the momentum with that, because new businesses are a great opportunity to sort of show that we're not here to be feared. We actually genuinely want to help the businesses thrive. So yes, we've seen that, but we'd like more.
Okay, thank you. John Wiley, you're next on the list. Unmute, John.
Does help if I unmute. Yes, I've been chatting away there. John Hale has sort of taken some of my thunder, but I do have some questions. With regards to businesses, I mean, how confident are we that the database that we've got is correct? The reason I ask is I got a letter about cosmetics for a business that I was involved with 10 years ago. We never sold cosmetics and the business no longer exists, but I appreciate those things happen. But with regards to new businesses, do we have something on the web page that we can get new businesses to sign up so as we can actually get databases of these pop-up businesses? And assuming that they don't do anything majorly wrong, are we going to take a light-handed approach if they do something wrong because of the sort of changes in legislation that not everyone fully understands?
Thank you. Yes, I'll pick up the last bit first because that's a straightforward. Yes, pragmatic approach is going to be essential here. So that's not just the message that's come from the centre in terms of the government position on this. Locally, we are only ever looking to take action against those who are seeking to trade outside the law, the rogue traders, the people who are active. We recognise that it's challenging enough ordinarily navigating legislation and standards. It's challenging enough in an environment where perhaps your business has taken significant financial damage through COVID, and it simply is there's a lot of things to consider if you're running a business, not least with tax and various other things which can be pretty complicated. So yeah, always will be pragmatic, and certainly around new legislation there will be staggered rollout of this stuff, and with that we'll always have our own way in which we want to try and work with businesses to get there. So absolutely that. In terms of the former and our database, yes, that is an inherent issue that we have. So unlike the food industry where there's statutory requirements to register, people don't have to register a new business they start up. So frankly, sometimes we don't know a business exists without significant attention paid to trying to go out to find businesses, and there's lots and lots of businesses in Hertfordshire. So we try to work around intelligence. So where are the businesses that we need to try and find first? So that's what we did with the cosmetics one. We definitely recognise there is some, so there will always be some out of date content on our database. But in that scenario, I guess we would rather unfortunately send out that correspondence to somebody that no longer trades in the industry. But what we have had was a good response in that some of the businesses had missed that their industry was so affected. That key date is this month, for example, for cosmetics industry. So we really didn't want people to be falling foul of new requirements, which are really upfront hurting them. So yes, again, a bit like new businesses, the more businesses that come to us, we can refresh the database, and we really want to help them. So it is an ongoing challenge, that one.
Thank you. Colin, you want to come back?
Yes, developing that latter point, in fact, and I wonder if Russell can just clarify how we go about, if we do indeed, with newer businesses promoting our trusted trader scheme, because I'd like to see that expanded more and more people being aware of it, rather than going to some of these commercial options such as checker trade, where essentially you just pay and go on a database rather than being strictly vetted.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I understand where they come from that question. So our trusted trader scheme isn't available to all sectors of industry. So our scheme is focused on the tradesperson, so your plumbers, your roofers and the like. It doesn't focus on some of the retail and manufacturing industry where some of those other local authority schemes do touch on those. And the reason we initially selected that industry because it was one that we felt that whereby the consumers needed the most support, the most help, and that had the most prevalent problems of rogue trading and issues. So to really sort of minimise the risk. But absolutely, there is still scope for us to be doing more to promote, I think, Hertfordshire businesses, retailers, and manufacturers who are complying in a way that which they can endorse that. So we have had there's some ongoing discussions around that, which I say I'm not party to, but with the LEP and other organisations around what we could be doing in the recovery phase that we're in now to promote those good businesses do that. So that is something that's on our mind. But to date, we don't have a scheme that will cover all of the industries out there.
That's encouraging for the future. Thank you.
Okay, now I got a few questions as well, whilst we can. First of all, do you think that we have sufficient resources in trading standards to cover both what we do on a day-to-day basis, plus what we've had to do because of Brexit and perhaps COVID? And do you feel as though you've had sufficient support in terms of organisational structure and organisational numbers?
Thank you. I think in the short term, yes, the paper does touch on the integrated plan. So we highlighted the new pressures and the new demands that come with that. So we're comfortable that in the short term, knowing what we know will be happening for now, that we have sufficient to meet those demands and we can catch up on the work we've done. One of the sort of the upsides to a national lockdown was that there were far less of our road traders going door to door because people were home and that sort of thing. So perhaps the demand reduced on that side of things. So we're hoping that as the sort of the line, the sort of the curve goes up and down, that we return to an element of normality. I'm very confident that the demands from Brexit from businesses will ease. What we don't know is what will happen next. If we have and start to have an issue with larger amounts of imported goods coming into the country, more inland enforcement, that will be something we'll need to revisit. But I don't see that as a something in an immediate term to concern. So yes, the support's there.
Okay, that's important that we have we've given you sufficient resources to do your normal day job, and I know it's been impacted both ways, up and down. And you mentioned some of the reasons why, plus all the extra work you've had to do because of these two issues. John Wiley, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully I'm unmuted this time. It's with regards to the database, I just wonder, have we actually considered speaking to the districts, because they will have an up-to-date database because they've been giving COVID grants out to many businesses, and whether we could actually ask them to send an email out to people to say, contact trading standards, register, so that we actually build up our database and we can get more helpful information out to them.
Thank you, John. I'm not aware if we have actually done that or not, but what I'll do is I'll certainly go back. It's a good idea, and I think via our connections through the sort of the Better Business for All partnership, where we're looking to sort of try and reduce regulatory burdens on businesses, we'll always seek opportunities to sort of to target that. So I will take that one back and see if there's anything we can do to improve on that.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no more questions. Russell, thank you for that. I think we may well be asking for you to come back perhaps the back end of the year and update us on where we stand. I think it's important we're kept informed of where trading standards are in this in post-Brexit, because it's of interest to us as councillors, so we can be aware of the situation and where, if there are any blockages, where they are, and if not, then where people need to go. So brace yourself to do something towards the back end of the year, updating your charts as well. Thank you. No more questions. Can we? I think we have to, in this case here, the Cabinet notes the report and steps taken to address the challenges being faced. Can we note the report, please, in chat? Thank you, officers. We've now noted that report. We'll come back to some other things on the community safety side at the end of the meeting, if I can. There's a couple of questions posed there. But now we move on to Waste Management Performance Report. This is going to be Matt, you going to take this, or Joe?
Yes, hi, good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'll take this in Joe's absence due to annual leave.
Okay, over to you.
So the performance report is to be taken in two parts. Firstly, the outturn for 2019-20, which is historically presented shortly after publication of DEFRA's national data set in November-December each year. Publication of that national statistic data set is delayed due to the current pandemic and was not available at the time of writing this report. They have since been released, I think on the 3rd of March, and so I'll verbally add national context in where relevant. And secondly, an overview of available information for 2020-21, specifically highlighting some of the pressures brought about in waste during the pandemic. So starting with the 1920 Waste Disposal Authority performance, there's a series of graphs in the paper. The first graph, graph 1, shows the continued positive trend in reducing residual waste volumes per household. Graph 2 shows a continued rise in the use of landfill for disposal of Hertfordshire's waste, with 15.7% of the total waste managed excuse me, by local authorities being sent to landfill. The lack of a long-term contract for energy recovery and the short-term contract starting next month, I mean, this indicator is unlikely to improve for at least the next 2 years. Nationally, whilst the total local authority managed waste remained quite steady, it's around 26 million tonnes a year, the volume of total waste sent to landfill has significantly reduced by around 600,000 tonnes. That's a 21% reduction on 2018-19 levels, as additional ERF capacity has come online across the country. Members will be aware of the May 2020 decision to award a new 10 plus 5 year contract for Hertfordshire's residual waste, which will start from either April 2023 or April 2024, and work is already underway and scheduled for an approach to the market later this year. The graph 3 shows an increase in the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling or composting from 51.7% in 2018-19 to 52.3% in 2019-20. It's a modest increase, as we've seen in previous years, and very broadly that mirrors the national position, which moved from 44.7% in 2018 to 45.5% in 2019. The Resources and Waste Strategy second round of consultations are going to refine those from 2019. They're due imminently, but it's clear that as a country there's much to be done if the proposed targets are to be met. Moving to section 5 of the report, it looks at 2020-21 and the impact of the pandemic in terms of information so far. It's clear that the lockdown measures have had a significant impact on the amount of material being generated at the curbside, and graph 4 shows the additional volumes of residual waste being managed. Graph 5 shows the additional food waste volumes, with lower volumes in April and May explained by temporary suspensions of some organic waste collections, and table 1 of the report summarises information to date and the significant additional waste that we managed in all waste streams. From 5.8 of the report, members will recall the recovery plan for reopening the recycling centre network after closure at the start of the first lockdown on the 23rd of March last year. We opened with 10 centres, social distancing measures in place from 11th of May, and 15 of the 17 centres are currently open. Table 2 shows less waste in quarter 1 due to those early closures, and graphs 6 and 7 demonstrate the higher volumes and pressure that's been evident since reopening the network. Our position is broadly mirrored nationally. We use data collected from the National Association of Waste Disposal Officers. So data for the first 2 quarters of 2020-21 is available and shown in graph 8. So we're seeing high levels of curbside materials as the population has remained at home. And in respect of recycling centres, in graph 9, there's a similar reduction in Q1 where other centres were closed, and the Hearts network can be seen in Q2 to be receiving small levels of additional waste, which differs from the surveyed local authorities in the data set who are showing modest reduction in residual and a high reduction in non-residual waste types at their centres. So whilst there are no direct financial implications in this report, it's clear that the volumes of waste being managed have impacted budgets at both Waste Collection Authority and Waste Disposal Authority levels in Hertfordshire, including the AFM, the Alternative Financial Model payments, which are projected to be nil at the end of the year. The recommendations members are asked to note the report. Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, Paul, you're first with questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of glad to see that there's sort of been some improvement, but obviously, as was said by Matthew, that some of that increase is obviously, people have been at home during lockdown and have had a lot of time on their hands and probably been able to spend more time sort of sorting out their waste and all their recycling, and obviously it's just concerning what might happen when people go back to having extremely busy lives again. I was sort of looking at on the graph of I think it was 4.5, and it's fairly sort of the percentage of household waste sent for reuse. If you look over the years, it's fairly static. It's very minimal changes, and then it talks about composting. Now, when you look at that figure and we talk about composting, well, presumably, there's a lot of grass collection now. That's increasing across Hertfordshire now. So I guess that factors that has effect on that graph. And although it's being sent for composting, is it the best use of dealing with grass, sort of sending it around Hertfordshire in the back of a freighter? To be used for composting rather than having it in people's back gardens. But what I want to talk about sort of as well was about recycling. Again, it is good to see the sort of increase in recycling. But when you look at the sort of the increases that we're looking at in residual waste or waste going into landfill, it's clear that there's just not enough recycling. I think we have to say that there isn't enough recycling going on, and while the figures at times show improvement, the step improvement isn't enough. And I know locally we've had issues with contamination. I don't know if this is a county-wide issue with a particular reseller or not, but we're having lots of well, they're not miscollections, but they're foul collections now because there's contamination, and the resellers, I think, said to Broxbourne, we're not going to take it away. So therefore, we're not where there is contamination. The people that collect the refuse aren't taking things away. But I think what it does prove is it is very, very difficult to recycle individual items. And I know in Broxbourne we had this sort of strange combination of plastics and tin, and it just doesn't sit comfortably. And you still have to sort of think, well, you can't just, I can't just put something in a box without thinking, where does this go? Where does it? And when you're looking at sort of 40,000 homes have to probably do that every week, every 2 weeks, or every fortnight. We've got to be looking at simplifying the process, across the piece. And I just think that having, I think when you speak to households and you speak to sort of councillors that are responsible for setting up services, the most easiest way to do it would be having combined collections of all sorts of materials that were later on sorted mechanically or by other means. Now, I know there's always a cost, but we've just got to sort of try and simplify it for householders. Otherwise, I don't think we'll ever succeed in trying to reach the aspirational targets that we have. Thank you, Chairman.
You want to comment on that, Matt? Before I do?
Yes, I mean, all fair points. I suppose in terms of back to normal, if you like, is the sort of the first point that you mentioned. Leading industry experts are suggesting that people working from home more often is, like for many in the county council, going to be more of the norm. So we are likely to perhaps not see the increased volumes that we have so far this year, but a higher than normal level remaining in the curbside stream. What we've seen is a big shift so far this year from what would typically be commercial waste into the household waste stream. People, are not going out and eating in restaurants, or are working from home rather than generating waste in their place of work. I agree, certainly in terms of the points raised around a consistent offer, and indeed I referenced the resources and waste strategy consultation, which members are aware of. We believe that the second round of consultations will be launched in the coming days, if not today, and that touches on a number of things that Councillor Mason has mentioned. The extended producer responsibility will specifically look to target improvements and funding in packaging waste, such as the dry curbside materials mentioned. And consistency is going to be really important in terms of feeding into that process. With a weekly collection of food waste, when we look at our compositional analysis, has recently come out for Hertfordshire, it's still the case that a third of the residual waste containers is food waste. So that's where some big gains are still to be had.
Yeah, that's complicated by somewhat that some of the districts and boroughs are doing as far as their collection. But I'll come on to that. Tim, you want to come in?
Thank you, Terry. Yes. Yeah, I was sort of going to highlight about from Paul Mason's questions also the Resources and Waste Strategy 2018 paper. It is quite radical, but Matt's addressed that and highlighted that. My question was going to be on the household recycling and waste centres operated by Hertfordshire. Well done to yourselves for reconsidering and will be reopening 3 of the largest recycling centres 7 days a week. That is good news. I actually had to dig out an old photo when I was campaigning against this from 6-7 years ago. I think I was slimmer at that stage. My question, though, is with spring now upon us, with Easter weekend coming shortly and the traditional sort of spring cleans, what's the capacity level at the household recycling and waste centres to accommodate this busy period? Is there any problems that we should be aware about, COVID restrictions, issues with hard plastics or anything like that? Just making sure that we're up and running and ready for the busy weekends coming up.
You want to answer that, Matt?
Happy to, Chairman. Absolutely, we're alive to capacity issues, not just seasonally every year, and so we are deploying full resources, and that would include aspects such as additional opening hours at the Waterdale transfer station, so enable a specific window for tipping recycling centre containers. The 3 sites mentioned at Ware, Stevenage and Waterdale, we believe after recruitment process has been undertaken, should be operated 7 days a week from mid-May. And there are a range of tools still available on our website to advise residents about how and when to best use the network. We have been extremely busy, and we're conscious that the social distancing measures are still required. The pandemic hasn't gone away, but that has impacted on the surrounding highways, on local residents and on local businesses. So a review of spaces in conjunction with public health has been taking place regularly throughout the pandemic, and we are looking to open up and have opened up as many spaces as we can do at the centres, understanding that we still have a duty of care to staff, residents and the wider community. So yes, we are alive to it. We are doing what we can in terms of resource, additional vehicles, additional drivers, additional hours are being employed.
Yeah, and I'll add some things to that as well. There's also some traffic management going on as well. I'll let you come in a minute, Simon. Traffic management at major sites. Particularly Letchworth, whilst our major site is one which is residential and businesses which have been impacted by queuing. So we put in traffic management there, which is working very effectively. Similarly, we had to put traffic management. There's been traffic management over at Stevenage to stop traffic going on to the Gunnerswood Road. There's 2 vehicles there which stop that, even as well when it's a vaccination centre, complicated issues. We've also put traffic management down at Harpenden as well by the school there, because it was a bit, there was problems with blocking, making it difficult for children to cross the road because of queuing traffic. And also 2-3 weekends ago, we had to close a number of our sites because of traffic queuing. That weekend, which was very sunny, we found that a place like Weir, for example, our new site, we had to close Weir because the traffic back out on the A602, the police said, you will close the site. They won't give us my choice on this because we were blocking the A602 to traffic, which was something which was unacceptable to us as well, particularly the police as well, for road safety. But there's others where we've had to turn for, we've had issues around there as well of queuing back. So traffic management's been put in place where we can say to people, sorry, the place is full, turn around, come back another time. If people looked online, they would see when the places are closed, when they're busy, and what the lengths of queues are. It's gone down, the lengths of queues, I have to say. Last weekend was not as bad, but last weekend was Mother's Day, Sunday, and therefore people didn't go to the recycling centres, they went and saw their mothers. I use that as a metaphor, but that's what happened. And we find that when it's raining, of course, people don't go to the recycling centres. So there's often impact of weather and events. And yes, absolutely right, Easter, we normally see Easter having being a period when people do lots of things, particularly gardening and such like. So yes, we put things in place. We are looking seriously at the number of spaces that we make available. It was down to about 40%, 41% of the actual bays in order to maintain social distancing. That's increased now, the number of bays that are available. We've done some management around what we have on each of the sites to make sure we can get even more people in. But that being said, you still have to manage that situation on the site, and the operatives have to get a situation whereby they have to ensure that people are, only one person at a time is going up the steps, for example, and are wearing masks. So the operatives are a lot more pressure on them. We are looking at other solutions as well around what we could and couldn't do, but that will come out later today. Now we move into PERP, we can't do very much more immediately other than on the ground things rather than major strategy arrangements. So yes, we and even Easter was mentioned 2 or 3 weeks ago by Matt and Simon to say brace yourself because that's when it normally happens. Simon, you did put your hand up. You want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. You actually said what I was going to say about the traffic management, but just to give panel members a scale of that, we are spending around about £35,000 a month on traffic management, queue management at sites. So we are putting an awful lot of resource and effort into trying to cope with what is unprecedented, although actually I say that word now, but it's been going on for months and months, demand. But yes, we're spending around £35,000 a month on traffic management at our sites at the moment.
Thank you. I can add a few things that points raised by Paul as well. Districts and boroughs, we all need to step up and do more. 50%, around 50% is not acceptable. It's been like that for a good period of time. Some districts and boroughs have stepped up to the plate and have got near the famous 65% by the year 2035. Some of our districts and boroughs have done a splendid job in getting there. Others are lagging behind and seem to have reasons or perhaps excuses why that's happening. Some are just only above 40%, which means they have got to increase their capacity by 50%. 50% on 40% takes you up to 60. So they've got to do a lot of things. They often use excuses, but the principle being is we need better education. As far as different bins are concerned, I think places like PS, which do the separation of glass, metal, etc., cardboard, it works very efficiently and very effectively. And so mixing those sorts of items is one thing, but as you quite rightly say, Paul, districts and boroughs mix different things in different bins, which does not help the public. For perhaps the direction of more cooperation between districts and boroughs and more continuity. And as Matt said, that may well happen when the government comes out with its comments, because we have the case where East Hertfordshire recently, for example, went down the route of charging for their brown bins and therefore being unable to have food going into their brown bins because you can't charge to collect food, so it was going residual waste. And you heard Matt say that about a third of the residual waste is food. So that I think was a retrograde step, and I made it very clear to East Herts I thought it was retrograde, but it was financial. They made it clear that it was money that drove that. They may well be driven in a different direction. Once government policies come out and says you will collect food waste separately and you will collect it each week, we expect that to be the case in the not too distant future. Most of our district boroughs are actually doing that, and we would recommend that's the status which should be weekly collection of separate food waste, because it is something which, yes, is, as you said, Paul, is important because it's a big part of it. So any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any more hands up here at the moment. I think what we'll do is we have the recommendation in front of us, but I think what we ought to do is perhaps expand that recommendation if we can. The recommendation in front of us was that we note that the officer that we note the report that we're given here, which thank you very much for the report. But I think we ought to add on there that officers bring an updated report on the performance of the recycling centre service in the autumn of this year to us, which will be 12 months after bringing the service in-house. So we know what's improved, what hasn't improved, and what we've done in the 12 months since we took over for the House of Road Recycling Centres. So if we can put that in as an extra recommendation, so that in the autumn time, they can come back here and tell us where we stand in a similar type of arrangement. Would you all be happy with that? Anybody say not? Nobody say not happy? In which case, can we note and agree that new recommendation, please, in the chat? I think we're about there. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. This is I think that ends our formal business. This is the last meeting of the cabinet panel in this this 4-year cycle. And some of us may be back, some of us might not be back, but for various reasons, either not wanting to come back, or because perhaps our associations don't want us to come back, or perhaps the public don't want us to come back. And perhaps when we do come back, we might be in different positions and different responsibilities. We don't know. But in advance of that, can I thank you all for your contribution? Over the past 4 years, I think we have challenged officers, and we continue to challenge officers and recommend we do. And that's what we're about here, is asking the questions, sometimes awkward questions, and I support that position. We particularly had that situation with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's why I'm so disappointed that we couldn't do it today, because we feel it's a golden opportunity for elected representatives like us to take on the Police and Crime Commissioner, so we can report back to our electorate. Yeah? On that note, John Howell, you want to say something?
Just to concur with your comments and to wish everybody well in the future, whatever that may bring them.
Thank you, John, very much indeed, and thank you, officers. Carly, I hope you enjoyed your first session in a cabinet panel meeting. When we are not doing it via Teams or Zoom, it's a very different atmosphere, and it is different in a council chamber than it is online. But thank you once again for your participation, and thank you, officers, for making it happen, because it's not that easy. Let me say that halfway through this session here, I lost internet connection on one of my machines, so I didn't have the reports up in front of me, which was a shame. But we've managed to get through it, and I do appreciate all your help and support. So once again, yes, good luck to you all, and thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bye, good luck.
Thanks, Terry. Bye-bye.